We're now beginning section 3 for chapter 1. We're going to be looking about how we obtain data. Well, how do we get data? One way is we can go out and observe people. We can do this in a controlled or a laboratory setting, or we can do this in the real-world environment. Now, especially in the real-world setting, it's important for the observer to be unobtrusive. If we know we're being observed, we often change our behavior. Usually, these observations are associated with a study using either descriptive or correlational or experimental research. More on these later. Another method for gathering data is the survey or interview. As you might guess, surveys and interviews are particularly impacted by participants lying. For example, apparently we pour a great deal of liquor down the sink if we compare the amount of drinking people say they do with the number of empties we find in their garbage. Now, another source for data are standardized tests. They give us a lot of information, and I'm assuming that anyone reading or hearing this is well familiar with standardized tests. Psychophysiological measures. These look at physical responses to certain stimuli. We look at body reactions to violent video games, and while many people don't report stress, their bodies show elevated cortisol levels, higher blood pressure, faster heartbeats, etc. while they're playing these games. All of these are physiological indicators of stress. The body keeps score. Case studies, while often very interesting, have to be interpreted with considerable caution. We cannot necessarily extrapolate one person's life experiences to other people. And life history records are another source of information. Sometimes people don't remember things accurately, sometimes they lie. So we have to check our records. For example, there would be times I would ask a parent if other teachers had ever expressed concerns about little precious darling and be told no. But then I would find document after document in the child's permanent record to indicate that this was not true. Descriptive research. This is observing and recording behavior. Some of the most interesting descriptive research focuses on looking for germy places. One question that has been researched regards the use of public toilets. In a row of stalls, which one is cleanest? That is, which one is used less? You have a guess. Several studies have supported that it's the first stall. The second stall is the most germy. Correlational research looks at the strength of the relationship between events or characteristics. The correlation coefficient lets us know just how strong the relationship might be. Now, this is what different correlations can look like. A positive 1 correlation is very strong. If we know A, then we know B. A negative 1 correlation is also very strong. If we know A, then we know not B. A 0 correlation means we can't make any suppositions. If we know A, maybe B, maybe not B. Be aware that correlations don't go both ways. While A may be strongly correlated with B, B may not be strongly correlated with A. This would happen when all or most of A is within B. Now, one of the most important things to understand about correlations is that even a very strong correlation does not mean that one thing causes another. There could be a third factor that is related to both, which may be the point of causation. For example, some correlations include regular tooth flossing is associated with living about 3 years longer than non-tooth flossers. This one is interesting because initially it was assumed that flossers probably engaged in a number of other healthy habits, which contributed to their longer lives. However, with further research, what was discovered is that flossing gets rid of a number of opportunistic entities that live in our mouth. It did turn out to be a causative factor. Another correlation is the link between violent TV and video games with violent behavior. This link was first published in the Bobo Doll experiment by Alfred Bandura. One group of children watched a violent TV show, any Roadrunner cartoon. The other group watched a pro-social show like Mr. Rogers. When left to play, those children who had just seen the violent show would begin to beat up the giant Bobo doll. Clearly, children modeled behavior. This book, The Early Window, discusses whether prolonged, repeated viewing of violent shows makes significant changes in children's behavior. Does playing a violent video game make you into a violent person? We still don't have an answer to this question, although there is a lot of data that indicates there is a strong correlation between the two. Of course, the other possibility is that individuals who are prone to violence have a preference for violent TV and violent video games. By the way, this book changed children's television. There were congressional hearings associated with the book. Violent Saturday morning cartoons disappeared. Another important way that we gather information is to do experimental research. In this situation, we will have 2 or more matched groups. Conditions are held constant in both groups while one variable is manipulated in the experimental group. Then the 2 groups are compared to see if that one variable made any real difference. How does this work out? Well, one of the correlations that we knew about since the 50s was that there was a relationship between cigarette smoking and certain forms of cancer. The tobacco companies would point out correctly that this was a correlational research. Causation could not, should not be inferred. Perhaps people who were prone to cancer were also prone to craving nicotine. Unbeknownst to most, the tobacco companies did an experiment using 2 towns in the northwest of the U.S. These were in areas in which the next town might be a couple of 100 miles away. In one town, they marketed high tar and nicotine cigarettes, and in another, they marketed low tar and nicotine cigarettes. They then followed the towns for several years. It's a longitudinal study, by the way. Although they tried to keep these results secret, what they found over time was that there were significantly higher cancer rates in the high tar and nicotine town. Cigarette smoking indeed does cause cancer. An experimental design can show causation. This is another one of your supplemental handouts examining some common myths of children behaviors. These myths are based at best on correlational data, not experimental data. Now, a new way of gathering data is to look at big data. Before computers, it would be unusual to have a study that had 1,000 data points. After computers, we now have studies with 100,000 data points. With big data, which looks at data gathered by hundreds of computers, we now have billions of data points. This information often comes to us from social media and search engines. Try going to your Google search engine now and type in why. There's a very good chance that one of the suggestions will be, why is the sky blue? This is because this is one of the most asked questions that finishes up the beginning why. Now, try typing in, is my boyfriend? I'm guessing cheating will come up, as will bipolar. Type in, is my girlfriend? You could probably predict that one of the completed questions that will be suggested is my girlfriend pregnant? We get a great deal of data from these types of sources, and it's honest data. We know how often people look up banana bread recipes, look for coupon codes, look at porn sites. Facebook in particular does a number of experiments daily, looking at different, very specific groups to see how they might respond to different advertising. What catches the eye of a 20-year-old woman who attends a private college? It's also a bit scary Okay, we're pretty sure our devices listen to us. I've gotten a number of stories from people that suggest this. I'm also left wondering how much I've been influenced by what they know about me. I look to my Pandora station. When I worked at a school that was 80% Hispanic, I used to get ads on Espanol. Now, of course, the ones that really worry me are the ones that talk about making end-of-life arrangements. What do they know? And just a final word on research. This is the end of our third section on gathering data. Next, we're going to be looking at the Dunning-Kruger effect and examine 3 theories.